All right, folks, it's been a while. Once again, into the breach. I am CR and our co host CJ. We just felt that we'd come on tonight and maybe have couldn't come up with a title or something to talk about. So we figured out that we would just do a free for all and talk about whatever comes to mind. Um, so how are you liking summer so far?
Hot. Yeah, I think I've melted at least 3 times today.
Yeah, yes, today was actually kind of a bit of a respite from what we've been having here in Minnesota. It's just
Oh, not here. They said it was supposed to be a lot cooler, but it really wasn't.
yesterday I could barely breathe outside. It was just bad.
Yeah, it was bad yesterday, and then Saturday we went to Agate Days in Moose Lake, and it was 100.
Wow,
Yeah, it
that's
was bad. It was pretty much walking around and just melting.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was at the train museum on Saturday. I only made it half a day. It was just and I got there at like 8:30 and left at noon, and it was like that was all I could do. So
Yeah.
what would you like to start off talking about tonight?
Well, you should talk about your UFO encounter. And
Okay,
then I will tell a few of mine because mine are a little bit longer stories that I would have to go into detail about. So,
sure.
um, yeah, you go for it, and then I'll tell mine.
Alrighty. So, and I really haven't told a lot of people this because, there's a lot of naysayers out there, but it was probably, I'm thinking 2008, 2007. It was Valentine's Day. Uh, Best friend of mine came over, two single guys during Valentine's Day were like, this holiday sucks. Let's just hang out. So we were at my parents' house. My parents were away for the weekend, and we were hanging out. And the sliding door, uh, there's a sliding door that goes out to the deck, and then beyond our deck is a schoolyard. So it's a big open field, and it was probably I don't know, probably 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and dark out, and I was looking out across the schoolyard, and I just a twinkle caught my eye. I was that that's weird. It's not too uncommon because we are in the major commercial flight path for Minneapolis St. Paul International. But this thing was acting differently. It was darting from side to side. It was acting in which a way that a aircraft, either civilian or commercial, cannot act. Um, and it was a triangular shape, and there were changing lights that were going around this object in a triangular fashion. Um, and we were talking, and I stopped in mid sentence, and he was like, "Hey, dude, what's going on?" I said, "Come sit on the couch and look out the window and tell me what you see." Um, and I was totally ready for him to go, "I don't see it. What are you doing?" Well, he sits down and he goes, "The hell is that?" And we got up and we walked to the screen door. We must have watched it for a good 3, 4 minutes. Um, it was just, for a little bit of time, it'd be, stable, and then it would move to the side for a bit, and then it would look like it would change altitude, and then it would go back down to the same altitude and just move over a little bit. Um, and So we're both sitting there, and we're like, don't have to talk because you look at at somebody who's seeing the same thing, they're seeing it. Um, and I thought, he was just gonna be like, oh, whatever. His bright idea is he was like, hey, let's get in my truck and let's go chase it. So, we get into his truck. It was a Chevy Silverado, like a '94, and right right in the general direction where this object was over was a industrial park called Air Lake Industrial Park in Lakeville. And so we started kind of driving out that way. And I kept looking at it as we were driving, and it was basically had the same trajectory um, as we were. So I could see it in a distance, but it was moving a little bit. It wasn't getting too far away. It was stationary. So we ended up, and this is probably about a 5-minute drive from my parents' house. So we get on the road that takes you uh, out to the industrial park, and we had made a corner, and I lost visual, and I looked up just as one object became three, and it disappeared. They all went into different paths and took off. And so I said, "Hey, it's gone. It's split up into three objects." And he stopped, and we're looking. We didn't get out of the truck, but we're looking. And we can't find this thing. And all of a sudden, we had this thought of, okay, we're not in a safe, comfortable spot right now. We're out in the middle of nowhere. We're in its territory. We both looked at each other and we said, let's get out of here. And we took off. And I never saw anything like it again. At nights here, I'll look out my parents' porch and I can see when KMSP is using the north-south runway, because you'll see all the planes stacked up in succession at different altitudes for them to land. I have never seen that triangular object again, and I thought it was really weird that it had a color changing, rotating boundary around the triangular object.
I've seen a triangle too. I'll tell you all about it. That was years ago. Yeah.
So that was my story. And like I said, I haven't seen anything to this day, but I kind of know that they're around.
Yeah.
It's just
Once you see one, you're just like, yeah, there's more. If there's one here that I've seen, there's more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine started young. I never really believed in it to begin with because I was like, I don't know, it sounds like something sci-fi off a TV show, because you would see like unsolved mysteries and you would see like sightings and stuff like that. And you'd be like, yeah, right, whatever. Well, then I would start like seeing things off and on in the sky, and I'm like, that's probably not normal. Okay, well, whatever. And then I was working my very first job, and I was up at a cash register, and I was kind of standing at the end of the register, kind of when the cashier's not busy, they're waiting at the end of the register, waiting for people to walk up so that they can bring them up. And I was standing there, and I'll never forget, this dude comes walking up, but it wasn't like he was human.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like, the way I describe it is on Men in Black, where that little alien dude is piling that guy's body.
Yeah.
But this was all over the place. This wasn't just he was walking like a human. It was like he'd never walked in a human body before.
Interesting.
And I was a little freaked out. And then he walked away, and I was like, okay, whatever. And I was like, you can't convince me that was human. There's no way that was human. And then a friend of mine contacted me, and she said, I'm going to tell you something. And you probably think I'm going to think I'm crazy, but I think I saw an alien earlier. And I was like, oh, really? Because so did I. And she's like, well, I was getting on the bus, and this guy got on the bus, and he looked at the seat, and for the life of him, he could not figure out how to sit down. It was like he never used a human body before. Yeah. And she was like, I'm convinced that they're here because I don't know what's going on with this guy, but there's no way that this guy just suddenly couldn't remember how to sit down.
Right.
It was really bizarre. But then we see things here, I mean, all the time. One summer we went out to my lake place, and where I used to go during the summer, my grandfather had a lake resort, and we would have karaoke on Saturday nights. So my mom's like, let's drive down there and see what everybody's up to. And so we went down there, did karaoke for a little while, and then we were leaving. And I decided to roll the window down on the trip home. And I rolled the window down, and I'm looking out, looking up at the sky, looking at the stars and all. And I look up, and there's this triangular thing. And it's got 3 lights on it. And all of a sudden, 2 of the lights go off on it. And I kid you not, this thing was up in the sky, right? And it's just hovering. And all of a sudden, it whips a 180 and took off. And I could not for the life of me figure out what that was.
Right.
And I went home and told my dad and my uncle about it at the time. And my uncle pulled up a website and said, does this look like what you saw? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, it's one of 2 things. It's either a stealth plane that the government has adapted that they were testing, and it was out in the middle of the woods. So chances are not a whole lot of people are going to see it. You just happen to get to see it. Or that was not something from here.
Right.
So now I run across things every now and then. There's one that used to be out here during the winter right outside my apartment, actually just miles up in the air. I don't know. I can't figure out whether it's a drone. I don't think a drone would function as high up as this thing goes. But it was doing back and forth motions, up and down, left and right, and then it would shoot straight up into the sky and then drop like 20,000 feet.
Interesting.
And that made absolutely no sense. I filmed it. I have it on film.
Excellent.
And yeah, I caught it on video. It was great. And I sent it off to some people that I know. And they sent it up to someone with some expertise in the UFO field. And when he told him where I was from, he said, oh, yeah, your city is a hotspot. And that's because we have 2 military bases here. We have one that is just north of me, and we have one in Minot.
Right.
So it's possible that they're interested in what's there on those bases. So it was no big surprise to any of these people either. They're just like, oh, yeah, total hotspot. But I see things every now and then. I saw one, was it last summer? I was walking home from the store and I actually looked up, and it looked like a Mylar balloon at first. But then I realized the movements that this thing was making, that was not a Mylar balloon caught in the wind. And then it took off at high speed and was gone. So that's insane. So there's a lot of things that are going on out here, but we do have a historical UFO that was spotted in 1948 here.
Okay.
So just after Roswell happened, there was a UFO that was sighted here, and it was actually chased by a pilot. and he was a serviceman. And he was actually, I think, one of the first people to actually coin the term flying saucer because of the
Mhm.
description that he gave.
Right.
But that was a pretty crazy story. So yeah, there's something definitely out there for sure.
Well, and it is interesting how um, popular UFOs are now.
Mhm.
And it really wasn't that popular till uh, a few years back. And basically, what happened was, in a gist, um, so there's a nuclear powered aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz. My dad was actually served aboard her in the 80s. They were out doing exercises and they had a couple of flights up, and the something showed itself to these pilots, and one of the pilots actually pickled the thing with his reticle, like the firing reticle, and not to shoot it down, but just to get on it, to figure out what it was. And so that was the biggest thing, was now there is documented proof, because each aircraft has cameras in it. You have at least 4 to 5 guys in the squadron that saw this thing. And it slowed down, and it let it toy with them, and then as soon as it was done with what it wanted, it was gone in a blink. And of course, being the military, um, I could imagine they get back on ship and they see the tapes, and their higher ups are like, "Okay, zip your lips. This isn't going anywhere."
Yep.
But the nice thing about that is, when you retire, you're not bound to um, any rules or regulations or orders. You
Right.
can, say what you're gonna say. Now, depending on your job, like guys who are nuke techs or guys who work in intelligence, they're still bound um, by that rule. When they leave, is okay. Too much top secret stuff. Don't say anything. But
Right.
these guys were just pilots, and when they got out, that's when this whole thing spilled into the media, and it was like, okay, well, it's 2020, 2022, they're out there, you know.
Yep.
And I think the biggest thing, like the Phoenix Lights, that was huge for the 90s.
Yeah.
Um, and they've always just shown themselves. You got to be in the right spot to see it. But like you were saying, I think one of the hot spots is military installations.
Yeah. They're majorly attracted to that for some reason. There's something about I don't know if it's the nuclear power of, missiles or what it is exactly that they're attracted to. But there's something there that I don't know if they're using it as a power source or
Right.
if they see us with these deadly weapons and they're like, "What are you guys doing?" Because there was one case where they went to the base and they actually caused all of the missiles to power down.
Oh,
So, this was years ago, I don't remember which base it was, but there was a story out there about one where that had occurred. They'd seen some UFOs, and the UFOs actually caused everything to shut down. And so there is a question of, are they are they trying to stop us from using that kind of power because they're like, "You guys are basically your own worst enemies."
right. So my parents and I, we were watching some like UFO program last night, and they were talking about something that I had never heard before, but it makes total sense. and that is Dolce base. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Yes. Yeah, Dulce. Hmm.
And I just find that interesting. And it just, as soon as I found out about that, I'm like, everything makes sense now.
A lot of stuff goes down at some of those bases, I think. I don't know if I believe Area 51 at all. I think that might just be a government testing facility, and
Yeah,
that they probably, the reason they're keeping people away from there is I think they're developing stuff and they don't want it to get out. Because if it does, then our foreign enemies will get their hands on what we have or try and develop something to defeat it. And then we're screwed.
yeah,
That, or they're using deadly chemicals and they don't want anyone else getting um, caught up in the chemical, whatever chemicals they use on base that might, make people sick or kill them. So
right.
hard to say. Do I think there's
Oh,
aliens there? Not really.
no. You know, I see Area 51. It is like you said, it's a top secret R&D facility, and that's
Hmm.
all. Now, where the whole alien thing comes in on that was the movie Independence Day, because they were probably thinking, well, how can we spice up this movie and how can we make it make sense? Um,
Yeah, there's a lot of other references too. I think it's just because the top secretness of the base isn't
mhm,
even known apparently by the president of the United States.
right. Well,
So,
people know where it is now, but still,
well, yeah,
if you go down that road far enough, they come out of the woods at you,
the
and
camo dudes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and in those
Yep.
certain terms, they tell you to get the hell out of there.
Yeah. They've even blocked off the view from Tikaboo Peak. So,
Mm,
yeah, you can't even go up there anymore, apparently, from what I've heard.
right. Well, and also there's I forget his name, but the gentleman that found M Cave, he disappeared.
That founded what?
He found M Cave. It was a cave shaped
Oh,
platform.
that guy, the one that disappeared when he went looking for that. Yeah, because he said he'd found that cave and he went back looking for it. Yeah, he disappeared. They never found him, as far as I've heard,
Well,
anyway.
I thought it was interesting because um, that it wasn't his first time out there. He had been out
No,
there before and he
nope.
found it, and then he came home. He uploaded the video to YouTube, and when he put it on YouTube, um, one of the comments that he got was, um, you shouldn't go back. Bad things are happening out there.
Yeah,
I wouldn't do it. And then he just disappeared. And Kenny Veach was his name.
yeah.
A lot of people think that he was an odd duck, but when you do stuff like we do, people think you're an odd duck anyway. So par for the course for me, but some people, um, I could see that being a turnoff for people getting in the field. Is it's just a bunch of weird people doing weird stuff, but it may look weird from the outside when we're doing certain things a certain way, but there's a science behind it.
Hmm. Yeah, as far as I've heard, he's never been found. But yeah, he claimed he found that cave and then he went back there looking for it and then just disappeared.
Right,
So I don't know if he fell into some mine shaft or if he just kind of, just died out in the heat out there or what happened exactly.
right. And that's what I was gonna say. Was maybe he fell into something, or um, brings to mind that movie 127 Hours. where the gentleman was out in, was it Utah or something like that? But he had gone out. He had planned to go out for a day. He really didn't tell anybody where he was going. He didn't have much water or food, but he was in this little crevasse and disturbed a boulder, and it came down and it pinned his arm in place. And so there's a book and a movie about it. It's called 127 Hours. And basically, what happened was he got to the point where he realized if he didn't get out now, he was going to die in place. So, you know, he started going through his water. His water left. The power bars that he had were gone. Got to the point where he was surviving off of his own urine, and he was like, I can't do this anymore. I have to get out of here. I have to make a decision. And basically, what he did is he fired up his video camera and he made a message to his family. This is it. I don't know what's going to happen if you see this XYZ. And then he took out his little Victorinox army knife and started cutting through his arm.
Ooh.
And he got it all degloved and snapped his bone, and he got out of there.
Oh, God.
It was like a 2-mile hike back to his vehicle from where he snapped his arm. But he lived. So, who knows what happened to Kenny? Maybe he fell somewhere and got trapped and couldn't get out, or the camo guys have him, or the cave that he thought he was going in that was M Cave was, a deep shaft that he couldn't get out of.
Yeah. Yeah, really hard to say what happened to him, but I mean, hopefully he, if he is dead out there somewhere, he didn't suffer.
Right.
So.
And that's unfortunate sometimes that happens, but it goes to show that, because they kind of knew that he was going for M Cave, but other than that, they didn't know where he was going.
Right. He just wanted to go back and find the cave that he thought he had seen before.
Right. Well, and if you have seen any of his videos, he, I called us weird. He was an odd duckling.
I've seen some of his videos, yeah. When I heard about it, I went back and looked.
Yeah. He was always armed, which was a good idea out there. But
right.
Seldomly did he take any supplies. He would just strike out by himself. And I've heard him say, hey, I've gotten lost for a number of hours and told myself I would never do it again. And then in a month, he's back out there. So,
there we go.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ones that I've heard that was more interesting, because apparently M Cave is like a backdoor opening to Area 52 or Area 51.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. Is it's like a shortcut, and the camo guys didn't know about it or something like that, but apparently they do, because I've seen footage of people go to M Cave and it's all imploded. So
that is very interesting.
Yeah.
But
so
yeah,
there's know about it.
Yeah. The other thing that was interesting was that there's been some cases over the last few years that people, they somehow managed to tie the disappearance to UFOs and aliens. I'm not sure how, but apparently there is some kind of connection between people missing and UFOs.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it. What was that movie? Was it in the 80s or the 70s? Fire in the Sky?
Yeah, that was actually Travis Walton. I've actually met him.
Hmm.
Actually met him. He was at a paranormal convention one year.
Oh, cool. That movie used to scare the absolute shit out of me.
Yeah, and that guy, not lying. Mm-mm. You
No.
can tell when you actually meet him in person. Like you're seeing him on TV, right? You meet him in person and he tells you the story and you're like, like this guy is not making stuff up. Like there's
Yeah.
no reason for him to make stuff up.
Well, and I watch, it is kind of funny, how we're talking about this tonight, because last night I was watching The Fourth Kind, and I was actually talking to you while I was watching it. I forgot about that movie, and um, I'm not sure of the validity of the movie. Basically, in the movie, it states that it's a semi-real situation, which means that they had to reenact some scenes, and it's kind of a found footage movie. But
Okay.
basically, it's talking about um, it was a family in, I think, Nome, Alaska, um, and they were being visited and taken. And so there's bits and pieces of, like, the lady who's being harassed. I'll just say harassed by the aliens. She was a psychologist, a psychiatrist.
Oh, I know what movie you're talking about now. Um, no, that was actually debunked. There wasn't the actual story that they tell was in that movie that was BS. There was actually um a lot of stuff that was exaggerated and the
Yeah,
way they told the story was insane. Most of yeah, like I think the actual person that the story was about was legitimate, but what actually happened in the movie wasn't what actually happened.
right. So it's, and I kind of liken it to a Blair Witch movie.
Yeah,
All those found footage movies, you really can't, trust.
right.
Um,
Yeah, because I remember that one now too, and I remember looking into it because people were like, "Oh, it was based on a true story." I'm like, it wasn't.
yeah,
No, I believe it was based on an actual person, but everything that happened in the movie, complete and total fiction. Plus,
right.
they used an old Ancient Aliens reference in the movie that was laughable.
Hmm.
But they did use a reference to um, there's a lot of references to different abduction scenarios and different things. Like people who say that they see owls
Right.
will say that they've had an experience or they can't look at them because of the PTSD because of the eyes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and another thing that kind of came out of that was, and something that relates to my story was, either time loss or no recollection of time.
right.
For those, like when my buddy and I were driving, that was a solid half hour of time that I don't remember. Um, because I remember just getting back here, and he was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna go home." And I remember going in and looking at the clock, and I'm like, "It can't be." That was just like a 15-minute drive. Well, it was like a solid 2.5 hours later.
Yeah, it seems like time works differently when there are UFO sightings. I don't know what it is about the situation, if it's just the adrenaline rush of actually seeing something,
Right.
or if there's something more to it, or if there's some reason that when it's around, it affects time in a strange way. I'm
Hmm.
not entirely sure, but you're not the first one to say that.
Yeah. And who knows? It could be an effect of their engines at low altitude. You know, um, because who knows what they have powering that? Who knows their technology? So
Yeah, kind of like the stories that you hear of when a UFO passes, that a person's car will completely shut off. They
mm,
they can't get it to start. For some reason, that technology interferes with ours. It causes it to die. So,
right.
yeah, who knows? It's a really interesting thing. But I there was another one that I did see. I lived in another apartment building years ago, and I was working a job that did require us to work some hours, at least a few hours over the weekend. And I remember it was a Sunday afternoon,
Mm,
and I had been working a few hours, and I got off work, and my bed was angled so that if I kicked back, I could just look right out of the window, and it was a bright, just sunny day. It was actually end of June, because I remember it was right near July 4th, because what I saw at first I thought was fireworks. And I was just kind of hanging out and I was like, man, it's really beautiful outside today. And then I looked up towards the clouds and there was this little silver thing. And it started doing this zigzag and shooting into the clouds and back out again. And people always say, well, I can film that. I would just take my phone out and record it. Mm-mm. Wish I had. I was so freaked out by what I saw, because this little silver disc was doing zigzags in the sky, shooting in and out of the clouds.
right.
I had my phone right next to me the entire time. I put my hand down on top of my phone and was too busy staring out the window at what I was watching. So
Mm,
anybody who says, "Oh, I could film that. When I see that stuff, I can catch it."
yeah.
No,
Well,
it's
and
not how it works.
when I saw mine, camera phones absolutely sucked.
Yeah,
And I don't think I had a phone on my camera at the time, let alone have the clear mind to go, oh, I should film this.
yeah. When you actually see it, you. Mm-mm. I
Yeah.
was just lucky enough that I remembered this last time that I saw one to break my phone out and film it, because I was like, oh, I gotta catch this. I gotta catch this one. Because the first time I saw one, out my own window up by my apartment building, I
Mm,
was in too much shock. I mean, I think my language got pretty colorful as I was staring at the window. And I rushed outside, and there was an old vet that had been on one of the bases for years.
mm,
And I said, did you guys just see what I saw? And they're sitting and facing a different direction out from the front of the apartment building, whereas my window faced off to the side. And so, they weren't looking up, they didn't see nothing. And he said, well, what did you see? And I was like, there was a silver metallic disc that was jumping in and out of the clouds and doing zigzags, and uh, UFO, I guess. And the girl that was sitting next to him, I think it was his daughter, was like, whatever. She wasn't a believer. He looked over at me and he goes, we saw that stuff on base all the time. We just didn't talk about it.
right. Right.
What?
Yeah.
You know? So it
Well,
was
and
pretty crazy.
for me, it always seems like they like um, big, fluffy accumulonimbus clouds. They,
Yeah.
I
I
like
would think they would use it for cover so that they're not as easily sighted.
yeah.
A lot of
Well,
stories out there about that too. People seeing things in clouds and it doesn't exactly look like something normal.
right. Well, and it's funny because the number of years when I was a kid and I'd be on a road trip, that was our number one thing was because it's going to shock some people, but hey, in the early '90s, no cell phones, no Game Boys. Well, there was a Game Boy, but that was the game that we would play. We would sit in the car and we would look at the clouds and we go, okay, well, what do you see in that one, or what shape is that?
Right.
It kind of baffles me because it's like, what if they were always there, sitting behind a cloud?
That actually reminded me of another story too. Um, some friends and I went on a road trip to Wisconsin up to the Dells, and we were up there for the weekend. And on the drive back, we were sitting in the back seat, or no, I was in the passenger seat and she was in the back seat, and my friend was driving. And the two of us were chatting away, and all of a sudden we look up, and this thing comes down diagonal and drops down into the trees. And we're like, you saw that, right? And she's like, I think we just saw a UFO. And I was like, you think? Yeah, I think that's what it was. And unfortunately, our friend that was driving didn't, he didn't look up from the steering wheel or from the road to see anything. But we both saw this thing just like diagonally dive down into the trees, and we're like both looking at each other like, oh boy, what was that? It's like, who knew we were going to see a UFO on a road trip?
And I always think that it's better to see something like that with a friend because you have automatic.
You have somebody else to say you're not crazy. You saw what you saw.
Well, it's like, like my dad. My dad's seen Bigfoot. Can I say that he has? No. I believe him because I trust him. And there's, I've seen ghosts. Were people around when I saw the ghost? No, but I know what I saw. So to have someone next to you going through the same thing at the same time breeds that validation in there and breeds
Yeah.
holy crap, you're not going to believe this, but two of us saw this thing at the same time.
Yeah. Kind of like when I had that experience just this last week when I went, of all places, a physical therapy office, of all places for a ghost to show up. And that was weird too, because I couldn't believe what I was picking up on. And I was just laying back and he was adjusting my neck. And all of a sudden I feel someone walk into the room and I'm like, that's, and I'm like, that's gotta be my imagination. Then it feels like there's this eyes like staring me down, like like that feeling of like, okay, somebody's staring at me pretty hard. And I was like, oh, this has got to be my imagination. There's no way. And then it got worse. And then all of a sudden I felt what felt like somebody was standing at the end of the table, and they just shifted over suddenly. It was like they just moved. And I was like, holy crap. He was like, what? And he thought maybe he did something wrong while he was adjusting my neck, and I sat straight up and I was like, no, ghost. He was like, what? Since when? And I was like, I don't know. I was like freaking out. And it got worse, and then it shifted and bumped into the table, and the table actually shook. And I was like, no, you get out. You get lost, dude.
Right.
And he was laughing. He's like, seriously? And he's like, but what's really weird about that was that when you said that, he's like, I don't know why, but I got really bad pressure in my ear at the exact same time that you said that there was someone in the room.
Interesting.
I was like, well, at least that backs me up, because I don't know what was there. I couldn't see anything, but boy, could I feel it.
Right.
But yeah, it was like I could sense, like it was like a physical, like I could feel every move this thing was making. Normally I just know that they're in the room, but I couldn't see that anyone was there, but I could almost feel every move that this thing was making. Like I could physically feel if this thing made a move, it was like it affected me physically the way when it was moving around the room. So I was a little suspicious about what it was.
Right.
And I was like, those, or is this something else that I'm looking at? I really don't know. But yeah, it was helpful to have someone be able to back you up and say, nope, if I didn't see it, I sure felt it.
Well, even if you have someone like you can have two people in the same room, but they can absolutely not have the same experience.
Yeah.
I did Civil War reenacting for 10 years. And one of the forts that we went to was pivotal in the Dakota Sioux Uprising. uh, Fort Ridgely in Minnesota, right outside of Fairfax. Um, the group that I was with, the group that we portrayed, actually was billeted there during the attack. Um, so not only was I in a group that had history there, my ancestor came to that fort like the day after the attack, and he was there with Sibley and his men to uh, rebolster the fort, patch any holes, dig new breastworks, just get the fort tactically up and running again. Um, so here we are 100, you know, or so years later, um, and I have a feeling that ghosts, Civil War ghosts, like to come to reenactors because it's twofold. Um, One, we're talking like they talked back then. We're behaving like them. We even word our conversations in the way that they would have talked. We carry ourselves, and the number one big thing is we are in their uniforms. As reenactors, we strive for that authentic look. So granted, all of our gear is going to be reproduction, but it is to the thread 100% off of the patterns that the U.S. military used for those uniforms and gear patterns in the 1860s.
Right. So they will mistake you for one of their own.
Right.
Kind of like the story of the, what was it, the people that were walking through the field at Gettysburg and that soldier came out of nowhere and handed them that coin.
Yep. So we were at Fort Ridgely, and it was the Friday before, because usually, you take Friday off of work, you transit to where you're going, and there's probably about half day worth of setup. Well, when you're done, you jump into your uniform, and you kind of get into the mindset of, okay, um, I'm in the 1860s. I'm a soldier. So we use that Friday night for acclimatization to get ready
Right.
to be in character for 2 days. Um, we were the only ones out there. There was, Fifth Minnesota Company C. We probably had, oh, 10 people in our group, um, including two civilian reenactors. And there was the commander's wife, Patience, good friend of mine. Um, she was kind of getting into the paranormal side of things, and I had never done any investigating. I always thought it was interesting, but I had never done it. I didn't know how to do it. So it was me, Patience, and um, another one of my comrades that believed in this stuff, and to kind of get a sense of Fort Ridgely, um, the commissary, it was kind of like a big U laid out. Commissary was in the middle. They would have had barracks on one side, and then they had the powder magazine on the other side. Um, and then buildings all interspersed there. The only remaining building that has stood since the 1860s was the commissary. There is a powder magazine that stands today, but that was rebuilt. All the other buildings are just fieldstone footprints of their cellar. And so it was probably, I don't know, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. We were bored. We had been talking to patients about, oh, you've done this, you've done that. And she goes, oh, if you guys want to try it, why don't we just walk out where the buildings were, and we can, we don't have, I don't, she goes, I don't have any tools, but we can go out and we can get in the state of mind, and we can just sit there and feel what we feel. So we left our camp, we walked across the field. First building we came to was the remains of the Company C barracks. Um, and one thing you got to know about the Company C barracks was it wasn't just for Company C, it housed all the other companies that were there. It could house about 400 people. So it was just a long building with, just one continuous hallway with bunks and racks on either side in different rooms. Um, so when Little Crow went into New Ulm and sacked New Ulm in the 1860s, um, that was a day before the fort was attacked. Um, Little Crow hadn't had enough. He then decided to come up with his war party from the river up a big hill and then across a flat and attack Fort Ridgely. Well, so the day before, when he attacked Fort Ridgely, all the townspeople that could get away got away and ran to Fort Ridgely. So the next day, when he comes to Fort Ridgely, the barracks aren't only full of men, they're full of townspeople. It was probably, like I said, originally built for 400 guys. This thing was cram packed.
Mm.
Unfortunately, Little Crow set that building on fire, and not a lot of people got out. And that is the footprint of that building is where we first sat down, and we didn't say anything. We just kind of cleared our head. Wasn't thinking of anything, and that's what patience said is just sit down and let your mind go blank. And because normally you can't see them, but what helps is a clear mind. I
Mhm.
can't see them, I feel them. I've maybe seen one ghost. The of all the other times my encounters, I feel them. Um, so right away, the three of us are like, smell that? Yeah, smells like a campfire. No, wait, it doesn't smell like a campfire. We had campfires going over in camp, but the wind was blowing everything away from us. So couldn't have been a campfire. What we attributed was that smell of the barracks burning.
Yep,
Um,
residual.
and I couldn't hear anything, but it was heavy. It was like a ton of bricks sitting there. And it
I can
wasn't
only imagine. They
hard.
must be so tortured in that area.
It was just sad. So my buddy and I had had enough of it, and we're like, hey, now that we kind of know how to do that, let's go walk around to the other footprints. And we turned around to Patience. We were like, you want to come with us? She was like, no, I need to sit here and maybe help a couple of them figure out what's going on. We're like, okay. So we started going along, and the funny thing was, so the day after Little Crow attacked the fort, my ancestors showed up to help rebuild the fort and rebolster their defenses. And his so basically he was from Red Wing. He went up to Fort Snelling. He joined, and then he was put in Sibley's group, and he was only in the field for 1 year because um, he had rheumatism, which is rheumatoid arthritis.
Right.
So he got that when he was in the field, and it got so bad that they had to put him in an ambulance and take him up to Snelling, and he convalesced the rest of his years in Snelling. And I tell you that Lewis Johnson was his name. I tell you that to tell you this. So we're going around and we're doing the same thing that patients showed us how to do at each building, and we would give it, I don't know, 10-15 minutes, and if nothing was going on, we'd move to the next building. Well, we had been to every single building except one. I wonder if you know which one we were at. We come up, I
So,
had, what's that?
so you hadn't gone to the building yet where he helped out?
It was the infirmary that we were at.
Aha. Okay.
And I didn't know that. I, at the time, this was my first trip to Fort Ridgely. But I didn't know that. So we were sitting there, and as soon as we rolled up, my buddy's like, dude, this is the infirmary. He's like, Lewis could have been in here. And so I basically, we would just breathe a little bit and then just take that clearing breath. And then I was like, well, I I got to see if I can, see if I know he's here. And I said, Lewis, I said, you probably don't recognize me, but I'm an ancestor of yours. I'm in the same uniform as you were because of XYZ. And I said, we're keeping your memory alive. We're keeping everybody you fought with memories alive. We're teaching people. And I said, I want to know if you're here. Can you give me a sign? And maybe, I don't know, a minute later, crippling pain, like 10 out of 10. I'm doubled over. I'm almost falling over. It's hard to breathe. It just pain all over the place. And I looked at my buddy, and he was like, holy shit, are you having a medical emergency? And I just looked at him and I went, no. I said, but I need you to physically get me out of this spot. And basically, all he did was just grab me and move me. And within a foot, the pain went away. It was just that one spot. And I know I
That's
brought it
probably
up
where he was standing.
right. I know I brought it on myself by saying, give me a sign. But ever since then, I've had an understanding. And what's really weird is within the last 10 years, I found out that I have fibromyalgia. So it's probably just a coincidence, but that is kind of the pain. If people out there have fibro, you can kind of figure out for yourself. That was the pain that he was feeling on a daily basis. And who knows, maybe it wasn't rheumatoid arthritis. Maybe he had fibro and they just
Hard
didn't
to
know.
say because they didn't know what that stuff was back then.
Right. So,
I've had a spirit walk through me before where I felt everything from them. It was
wow.
totally, yeah, it was a total freak thing that happened. But yeah, my very first apartment building, the whole place was like a ghost train depot. And I was on my way home and I was walking up the parking lot, headed for the front door. And I kind of saw this dark shadow and I was like, great, one of the ghosts is up here again. And it just had become a normal thing at that point. But all of a sudden, he ran forward and ran straight through me.
Wow.
Yeah. We had a lot of spirits at my first apartment building. It was awful. There was one that would stand at the end of the hallway. And when you'd come out of your apartment building, he'd come running at you. And if he could knock things out of your hands, all the better. I don't know who he was, never figured it out, but he would come running at me every time. And I had just gotten home from the grocery store one day, and I walked in and I'm like, oh, better get ready for this to happen because he's going to do it. Had my hands full of grocery bags, and he comes running. I dropped everything.
Wow.
My ghost app turns on my phone and goes, ha ha, funny.
Oh, so a jokester.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same way with the ghosts at the Masonic Lodge here. They'll freak you out and then they'll laugh about it. I had one, he walked past the doorway while I was at the craft show. I was like, I didn't know this place was haunted. And when I came back from going down and looking down the hallway, because there's an area that's really haunted in the building. And after I had seen that one pass by the door, because it was just like a dark shadow that just went left to right across the doorway, I had my app on. I was trying to communicate after that because I was like, oh, I guess if there's ghosts here, I'll try. I come back, my app goes, surprise. Really? And then I was like, well, can you tell me your name? And it says Christian. And I was like, okay. So I asked one of the boys that is at that lodge more often than I am. And I was like, hey, who's this guy telling me he's Christian? He goes, I know exactly who that is. He takes me over to the memorial wall where they have all the pictures of the brothers that have passed away. And here's a guy whose name is listed as Chris Christensen.
Interesting.
Yeah, so ever since then, anytime that I go over to that lodge, I go back and say hi to the boys. And there's a little boy that haunts the place too. Nobody knows who the guy is or who the boy is, but they've seen him a few times. I finally got the chance to see him. And he didn't show me anything so I could see like a human form to identify him. But he appeared to me as a dark shadow. And he was only like 3.5, maybe 4 feet tall, tops.
Right.
And I turned around and he was just there for a minute. And I was like, oh, hello. And then gone. But they caught a video of what they believe to be the little boy. But he appears as this really weird pillar of light and runs around the lodge. He runs around the big room of the lodge where we have our craft shows. He's also been known to come in while we're doing the craft show and knock stuff over.
So the beam appears and then he appears, or he comes out?
No, he appears as a pillar of light on film, like when they have the cameras running.
Yeah.
He, for some reason, he appears as a pillar of light. We don't know why or how, but when they catch him on film, he appears as a pillar of light, and he runs around the room.
Right.
He just zips around the room super fast. We're like, that is so cool. They've been trying to capture him on film for a while. But there's quite a few there. We have quite a few of the Masonic boys that are still hanging around their lodge, still having meetings. And I've had a conversation with a few of them now. And at first, when you go there, if they don't know who you are, they'll tell you to leave and to get out and stuff like that. Like, leave this place, get out. It's like, come on, boys, will you just be nice? And then once they adapt to you being there and you having conversations, then they're really nice. But they're protective of their space. So,
well, looking at the time, we've been on for 1 hour and 10 minutes. So,
yep,
we could basically do this again. We've got a lot of stories we could cover.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I can't believe, how 60 minutes goes by really quick.
Right? I know. I looked up and like, wow.
Yeah. So let's I don't know if I want to set a schedule yet, but I think when you and I talk, we can come on and figure out what we
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, definitely. I want to do the one that we've been talking about, but the girl that was going to join us, she's going through some health issues right now, and she's been in the hospital lately. So I'm waiting until she's in a good place to be able to do that,
Sure.
because
So,
she'll be able to tell us, since that was pretty much a big part of her life growing up in, and I'm not going to say the word right now because you just never know. So
yeah,
we'll wait.
yeah.
We'll wait.
So, all righty. Well, it was great doing a show with you again. Like I said, it's been way too long. Hashtag life happens.
Yeah, seriously. I still find it weird that the last time that we were planning to do the said podcast, that your computer just happened to crash that day.
Right. Yeah, and I haven't.
Very strange.
That was the last time we were doing a podcast. So,
Hmm.
all righty. Well,
Yeah.
we will sign off, and we will see you next time.
Yep. And if anybody is in my area on Sunday, I don't know that anyone will be, but hey, if you are, I'm going to be over at a craft and vendor show from noon to 6 at a little saloon here in our city. So check in with me for details on that if you're going to be in town.
All righty. Well, we will talk to you later.
Alrighty.
Yep.
Bye bye.